All right, Mr. Mayor, we are live and ready.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. Time is 6:04 p.m. This is a work session, and we have a couple topics tonight to discuss. The first one is a presentation on the fuel retail and facilities improvements project, and the second one is the FY26 budget, reserve accounts, and capital projects. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Heidi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for our first topic, presentation, fuel retail and facilities improvement projects, we actually have our tenants, Josh and Marcia Patrick here, just to present a little bit about what's going on in that space. I will turn it over to them.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, got you loud and clear, Josh.
Okay, back in 2021, July, we submitted a thing to the city requesting repairs to our roof, which they did respond, and they temporarily replaced some panels and patched it up, and which was good for a while, and it is since become a bigger problem, and it seems like more and more we're starting to get more seepage through the roof, and I'd like to get it fixed. I have plans for the warehouse, and I want to expand in there, our store and our deli, but I don't really want to do that until we can make sure it's not going to be raining inside, and which it currently is. I don't know. Also, I mean, the electrical has issues too. We've done numerous repairs on the electrical so far ourselves. And I'd like to get it insulated, but I mean, I don't know if that may be a future thing too. But the roof is the important thing, and some of the upper walls on the building, actually you can see through them, from the inside, which I haven't really noticed before, but this winter I've noticed like there's gaps where you can actually see through in between the panels, and I don't know, that probably needs to be addressed also. Did you have anything? Okay. So that'd be it.
All right, thank you, Josh. And Heidi, were you going to have more to add to that, kind of what we're looking at going forward, or what do you?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So this was one of the council's priorities, and it was included for a federal and state legislative priority. We should hear back by mid-May, I would think, if the state's going to pick up any of that. It is also we submitted a CDBG application in December, and we were told a couple weeks ago that we would hear in a couple weeks that those applications were sitting on the commissioner's desk and that funding was secured. But I would like the council to consider that if these funding sources fall through, that potentially we'll have to do something temporary. I mean, more permanent than what we've done before. I don't know if we can look at having somebody come in and seal it, or I'm not sure what that's going to look like. We're looking at probably about a $240,000 repair to replace the roof, potentially, especially if we're putting in new purlins. And that's that's not in the budget right now. So a couple of ideas I had is we could go out for engineering and get that more finalized. If the council was interested in putting 20 or 30,000 in the budget this year for that, and for those engineering plans, that'd make it more solid for upcoming funding opportunities. Or we can look at some kind of a temporary repair with that in the meantime, while we continue seeking funding, but we certainly can't leave it the way it is. So, potentially we could maybe even do both, and we can get more into that discussion in the next topic when we talk about reserve accounts and capital projects. But I know that Josh and Marcia brought me keep bringing this up to me, and they've been really nice about it, but it's a pressing issue. I've been in there and seen it raining into buckets as our buckets are filling up the warehouse. And I think that it'd be pertinent of us to find some kind of solution this summer, whether it's temporary, waiting for the long term, or I'm really hoping that one of these pathways comes through to do a more permanent fix. So I wish I had more of an answer. That's where we're at, and I appreciate you guys coming. That way it holds direction, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Heidi for giving that little overview there. Yeah, I know that's something we need to focus on here. And it's only going to continue to get worse if we keep kicking the can down the road. So hopefully we can get some funding, some of the larger stuff. If not, then we're going to have to, we're going to have to really make some considerations here to try to figure out how to get this, at least get that roof patched up to where there's, it's dry. And then obviously if there's any, take a look at any of the life safety stuff with electrical. If there's some existing stuff that's not up to snuff, then we need to definitely take a look at that and try to get that as fixed as soon as possible. So.
And so through the mayor, I can delve into that piece a little bit more as well in the next couple of weeks, and then see if there's any wiggle room in the budget to include part of that as well. If that's the will of the council, I will keep working to see how much we can do with what we have for this coming year. And then of course, the best case scenario is that we receive funding.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that, Heidi. Yeah, I definitely want to keep this on I know we had talked about this and made it one of our priorities, so we want to definitely keep this out in front, try to stay ahead of it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I just wanted to reassure Marcia and Josh that it is the council's priority to take care of this building, and you're doing a great job with your business. We want to support you, and we sure do hope that we can get funds. But in the meantime, we're going to have to be looking at what we have in our budget and what we can do to make this building a viable building for the future. But I appreciate what you put into the city, Josh and Marcia, and we hope we can get this taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Anyone else with any comments or thoughts on?
Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead.
I just got a question for Josh. You mentioned that you could see through the walls. Is that at the back walls where you're saying that, where it's separated? Could you elaborate on that a little bit? I'm just trying to get an understanding of what.
Yes, it's actually connected to the roof in the parts. One is almost an inch of a gap.
Where you can see through the roof?
You see through the wall, the upper wall, because it's breaking apart. I mean, the building's from 1930.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to figure out if we got a siding issue too, or if it's a roof issue.
I don't know if it's connected to the roof, but if the city is willing to send somebody over, I can show it to them, and I can also take pictures and submit them in an email also.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
okay.
Well, I can go look with you too. I just was curious.
Yeah, it's actually, where the deli is, is the major one right there is almost directly above it. And it's held together, but then at the top, it's kind of like that. just kind of separates. And I noticed where it's kind of doing that in other areas, but it's not as big, but you can see light through it, and I don't know if that's going to be a hazard in the future. High winds or something come through and it's,
Yeah.
going to rip them off.
So, does it look, well, yeah, there'd be a little, yeah, we'll take a look.
I kind of had some ideas of what, how to keep them together, with like nuts and bolts and screwing them with a plate or something to squeeze them together again. But then I don't want to do that myself.
Right.
Because then it might mess up the other panels.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else with any additional thoughts or comments, questions? Well, we've got Josh
Mr.
Marcia
Mayor.
here. Yep, go ahead, Jack.
I've been working with Gable Steel. I've got some prices on buildings, but when I look at the repair cost for a roof here at 214, I'd hate to put good money on top of bad. I don't know what the useful life of that building is expected, but it's been there for a while, I know. And it may be worth looking at a complete replacement before you start dumping $200,000-300,000 into an old building when you get a new building for less money. I got a price on a 50 by 100, and I think it was just a shade over 100,000 with an insulation package with it. But it'd be worth, pursuing that before you spend a lot of money fixing an old building. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's kind of one of the struggles with the building itself would be, it'd probably make sense to take a look at that. The worst thing obviously in this case would be the disruption time to the business and, all the other fuel infrastructure and stuff that's connected. So yeah, we definitely need to start thinking about how we're going to address this and what the long term is too on that building in terms of useful life. But if it's, getting pretty close to 100 years old, yeah, it's definitely going to be getting towards the end there. So
Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Isn't going to say outright, but that's kind of what I was getting at is, do we have a structural issue that's causing that, and what's really going on with that building? And I think maybe we need to have somebody look at that and then get a big picture before we make a $300,000 roof decision.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead.
first of all, I don't know if I need to recuse myself from the discussion because Josh and Marcy are my in-laws. I don't know if I have a reasonable conflict of interest. We're not voting on anything tonight.
No. We're just having a discussion right now.
Sure. It seems reasonable that is, I think, the only city building currently in operation as a primary business. It's a cornerstone business in this community. It seems like a reasonable expectation of the business owner and the leasees to get some sort of reasonable maintenance on the building that they pay rent on. They've been in there for a long time. They are faithful tenants. They run an excellent business. They run the only fuel business in this community. I don't know what it looks like. I'm not a construction. I don't do anything in infrastructure, so I know that it's not just a cut and dry matter. But I do feel like Josh is more than adequately informed on what it would take to work on that building. I think Mr. Mayor and somebody from staff or somebody that represents the city needs to walk through that building with our leasing and look at some sort of plan of action. I feel like we owe it to them. They've been talking to us. I know like I said, I have that conflict of interest, but come on. What do we have? We have Tata's, we have the bar, we have our summer businesses, and we have the film zone. It's 3 places. I think that we should really take the time, be intentional with these business owners, and walk through their set up some sort of timeline and honor that. She said there. So.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
So the mayor and myself and actually Tim Dillon had been through that building. And that's recent, well, a couple months ago, when we were working on the CDBG, which is how we came to some of the cost figures that we did, as well as the suggestion that new purlings might be needed, which is part of that cost. But also part of it is an engineer. So that's the next step would be to hire an engineer to come down and somebody, you know, with a little bit more knowledge and capability to come up with a good plan for it.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question for Jack. What would that entail to get a new building? Would our building, like the inside, be able to remain there and build around it? Or do you know the specifics of that?
There's always remodel jobs where I think about Glen Miles that used to be here, and they built a brand new lodge up at Lake Louise, and the old lodge stayed there, and they built a new lodge right over top of it. So in your case, I think they could do it in phases to where maybe you could transfer part of your business to the other, but as they finish part of it, that you might, so you wouldn't shut you down. You may have to improvise on some things that you do there, but I think it could be worked out where you'd still continue to do business on a daily basis. You know, even if it was a temporary office building or something you had to work out of. But the only thing I'm looking at, like you talk about engineers, it all costs money, and you know, 10,000 here, 10,000 there. I mean, pretty soon you got a new building you could have had in place of it that has, you know, what you want in a building instead of patching up something that's already lived its useful life. So that question could be more answered by whoever's going to construct the building and what they could do to keep you going and not shut you down. That would be the goal. So,
Right, like chopping off where you have your glass door, making that your construction zone, getting that, you know, worked on, and then when that's completed, pushing you guys into the new space, working your front end. If you were interested in working out some sort of like phase project like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in looking at something like that if that's more reasonable than, I mean, something needs to be done. Like I said, I want to expand. So, I mean, we're like one of the only businesses open in the winter time, and it gets busy in there. And I've tried to expand a little bit. I wanted to go out into the warehouse, but I can't do it when it's raining out there. And I mean, I have enough buckets upstairs as it is, trying to keep them from running through and damaging the inside of the store. And once in a while, one will overfill and leak through the walls or ceiling. And, you know, then we got to go empty that bucket. And, you know, sometimes it'll rain and then it freezes at night, and then it rains again and it's full of ice. And so
I keep going back to a new structure. I think it'd be worth to have Gable Steel give us a price so you knew exactly what you're talking about in dollars. But when I look at some of your repairs, you know, it's like I say, it's like putting good money on top of bad, because the building has got age on it, and you know, you'd have the value in a new building, and it'd be tailored around more what you wanted to work with for expansion or anything.
Through the mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
I would be curious, Jack, if that gable steel, do you know where that steel is coming from?
Today I don't. I know that the Gable Steel's out of Florida, And I can have that answer for you tomorrow if you want to know that.
Well, I asked because that's part of why the costs are high is if it's grant funding, then we're pretty much guaranteed that we have to have American iron and steel, which
Right.
significantly increases costs. But if that was something that the city was able to do out of pocket, then it wouldn't be as big of a deal. So if you were asking, I would ask for both, or at least to see where it's coming from, and if they have an option for American iron and steel, because it'd be valuable to have both quotes for both.
And I can talk to Dave tomorrow. He can give us, and I wouldn't necessarily even rule out being stick built either. I mean, Jeremiah, that's something that you might have a handle on too, is cost wise versus wood versus steel. But all those things need to be looked at cost wise to see what we're going to come up with. I'd rather see you give them a new building and not have maintenance issues with it and have some life than patch up something that's going to continually have problems,
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on that. I've been thinking about this. Two comments. One, after today, you probably won't be able to afford Chinese steel anywhere in the future. So that ship sailed. And then the second comment is, so we've already got a brand new building sitting about 100 feet away from this building. So if we were going to start talking about building buildings and all this, we might want to start thinking outside the box and figure out how to just consider if it would even be feasible. There's a lot to this. I don't want to solve this tonight because we can't, but just a thought for everyone. I mean, we've been talking about getting that value-added building built out. That would be way easier to do all of that in phases than it would be to figure out how to displace these guys and, do all this and that. But we should just sit down and have a few more meetings and conversations on the thought of that. But I mean, we could easily start, seeing if that was any kind of option at all that would work next door. So,
Mr. Ray, if I may.
yep, go ahead, Vivian.
I would agree with that statement you just said. I was thinking the same thing about the building next door, and also thinking that this is not going to be solved tonight, and have some meetings in the future to try to work this through. But yeah, the value-added building is sitting there. It has potential. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Yeah, Heidi, go ahead. Whoever was going to talk next.
Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm kind of in the same position. I think when we were prioritizing this project in the past, we'd had a little bit of that discussion about potentially what it would look like to use that other building. And I guess at this point, the only thing left I'd like to say is want to make sure Josh and Marcia understand that we see the importance of this. And it's important to us, all of us. I'm pretty sure that we come up with some kind of solution. So I just want you to know we support you. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. And yeah, I'll echo that. So one way or another, we got to figure this out. And if we pull up our lease with the tenants too, I mean, I'm fairly certain we're, obligated to, not have them working and trying to run their business in a, leaking building. So, saying that, yeah, obviously it's a small town and, we've got to live within our means, but we also have obligations to, to our tenants. So, one way or another, we'll start slinging some ideas around here, looking at dollars, some funding opportunities. Hopefully we hear some good news on some of these other ones. But yeah, I think we need to maybe start thinking outside the box and thinking of some additional considerations or additional options for consideration. So. All right. Anyone else? Any closing comments on the fuel retail and facilities improvements project? All right. I don't know if we have anybody signed up online at all, Liz.
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right. Well, Josh and Marcia, thanks for coming. You're welcome to stick around for the rest of this, but thanks for coming and letting us know what's going on. And then yeah, we will continue to move forward. I'll talk with Heidi, and then we'll reach back out with you guys and get a meeting or two set up just to start thinking of some stuff conceptually, and then maybe, you know, get something that we can work with and bring it back to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, you guys. Okay, the second item tonight, item B2, FY26 budget reserve accounts and capital accounts. Heidi, if you want to take it away.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So you guys are making some slow and steady gains towards working on some of these smaller projects that we've been going through. If you look at page 3 of your packet, I just did a quick overview, and I don't think I captured all the projects because I was in a hurry to get this done. But in FY24 and FY25, for instance, we completed the city awning repair, the dock slab repair. We were able to make the pavement repairs in the city. That pavement repairs was with we were able to utilize part of that road surfacing grant for that. So that was great. That came out of that 88,000. And then of course, there was the multi-purpose building COVID-19 improvement project that happened here in this building, which still needs additional improvements. And then I wanted to give a little run through of things that are in the works or ongoing for either this spring within FY25 or moving into FY26. You guys are aware that we're just completing that BHO trailer project. We're waiting for the rebuilt Rams for that. And then road surfacing is going to be ongoing. We have the material, and then now this summer we're going to be putting that material down. BHO slab replacement was part of that dock slab. We had extra material, and we made slabs for the boat haul out launch that we will be trying to implement and see how that works. We need to find a good spacer connector between them. But that's something that we have a lot of steel kind of hanging around that we can come up with something is what Public Works was thinking. Jackalope Bay Dock. Oh, and I want to just pause right there and say, if you look at the last page of your packet, we received a notice today that we are approved for the matching portion of Jackalope Bay Dock from the Denali Commission. So we've been approved for an additional $482,000 for that project to make sure that it's whole and hopefully covers everything, and we don't come up short. So we will be filling out that paperwork this week for the award.
Amazing.
It's exciting.
So Heidi, just to clarify, that says non-federal match funds.
Right. So they're a non-federal match to the federal grant.
Okay.
So, and that was very specific. I had conversation with them. They said, we do not do gap funding. We only do match funding. And I said, well, we did put in an 8% match, but we're asking for 20. And now that's where this project is. So they let that fly. They were good with that. So that's the 20% of the project minus our contribution.
Okay. And you're saying, just so I'm clear, is there any more money that we have to come up with on top of it, or are we using our original match?
We're still using our original match of 140.
Okay. Okay.
So
And that's going to cover us for this grant as well.
yeah, they don't require a match for this grant.
Right.
This is the match to the federal grant.
Okay.
That's what this pot of money is specifically for, is to match federal grants.
Okay.
So,
right. Sounds
and
good.
I think that was probably in our favor, that we're like, we have a little bit, we have this big grant, but we need the additional piece. And so
Okay.
we are set to receive that award.
Okay.
So-
Sounds good. That's great news.
Yes, it is. If you go back to page 3 for me, then yes, that 140 is still in there. The raw water transmission line, we're hoping is still set to go. We keep hearing back from the EPA. They did actually come back again when needing additional information, as I guess they have time to just continue to review things while they're waiting for their review to be complete. So we'll see what happens with that. Sewer lift station, they've already got the ground open. They were able to expose the pipe going into the septic tank, and we're working on installing the new gate valves today. Once those are installed, then they'll start on the actual septic lift station, making sure to pump and clean that out and install the new infrastructure in that piece. So that should be done within this week. Very exciting to have that happening. Ditching and culvert replacement is ongoing. I did ask staff to pause because we have grant funding, which we also finally received the grant agreement this afternoon for the 2 aqua projects. And one is the pickup broom and the Frank Raby culvert replacement, as well as the Vista Avenue culvert replacement. So we're going to wait to have the funding so we can replace those. And then the other is to replace the inlet on Main Street in front of the liquor store, as well as to do the engineering and planning for the installation of an inlet in front of the pavilion. It won't be the actual installation. It's just the planning piece of it, because there wasn't enough funds in that pot of money for that. But with that, we should be able to turn around and hopefully find additional funding to install that inlet. So that would be very exciting. We are waiting to hear back from DOT on this inlet in front of the liquor store to make sure we have approval to replace that. That's one of the missing pieces. But recently we've had a few more discussions. It seems like things are opening it up and starting to fly and move forward. So that's good news, hopefully. City yard cleanup, and I just want to point that out, that's a big goal this spring, especially if we're waiting on the culverts. And really that's staff time to get that done. There'll be a little rental cost for Jim's big excavator, but we still have the money in the budget for that through our contract hours. Harbor improvements, they still have a little bit of money left for their port fee, that projects that they budgeted for FY25. And that was intended that way so that we can hire on or have Stan come back on for maintenance here starting in May. He'll get 2 months. And so that'll be his time. And then they're going to finish out that water line on E-float, install new toilets in the women's bathroom and a new bulletin board, as well as the other repair work he works on through his week. City office thermal envelope improvements. This is the Reveat project that we just received the go-ahead to start back up. And City Clerk Diamond was able to issue the RFP today for the insulation project. So if you remember, we did the bay door. There's the insulation of the inside of the building with spray foam, and then new heat registers, new windows and doors. So with the new windows and doors, we'll be doing probably in-house as well as the registers. It's the insulation will be contract work. And then I have on here, because Layla brought it up, cemetery set of new blades and oil change. Depending on that cost, we'll either throw that in the FY26 budget or utilize some of the FY25 budget. But it's good to keep that on deck. So that's kind of what we have going in the near future. But then we want to talk about what we're looking at for FY26, because this is where, if we want to start putting in a little bit of funds here or there to do some of these smaller projects, or if we're saving up funds for bigger projects, what does that look like? Of course, it's our funds are still limited, and we'll get into that piece next, but this is a pretty good picture of some of the more immediate needs. For instance, our cybersecurity improvements, we did apply for a grant for $15,000 for the policy documents. I think we could do that in-house if we needed to for a lot less. But then there is the additional costs of some of the more structural things we need to do. So I'm still waiting for a quote from AST for that. I was supposed to have it last week. I haven't received it, so I just threw 10,000 in there as a number, and hoping that it wouldn't be any more than that. But I'm waiting to hear back from them. I'll have a more solid number to present to you guys after I receive that. Harbor improvements, after talking with Layla and you guys at the previous meeting about the budget, about doing 5 more of those finger hinge pens, working on the electric pedestals, the new siding on the bottom of the building, plus maintenance time. We put 24,000 into the FY26 budget. So I just wanted to show that here. And that directly comes out of that port fee. So it's not coming out of any of the reserve accounts. It's just rolling over. And then we're tracking that at the bottom of the budget of what's left. And even with this in here, I think I tracked it at about 2,000 left afterwards. But we don't want to be too tight on it, knowing that there could be some flux. Historic boardwalk improvements. That's something that's really important to some of the residents in that area. And when I was down there recently, I don't know if it was just something about the winter and it being wet. It just looked so much worse. I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if it's getting worse or it just looked worse, or a combination of both. But we do have a plan to do some of that work internally. We're going to try flipping some boards and seeing what that looks like. Our part-time public works operator, David Botero, seems to be on board with that, no pun intended, for this spring or summer. So we'll see what we can do to put a little life back into it until we can do a more complete project replacing those boards. Of course, we talked about the Seldovia Fuel and Lube roof. And then Upper Dam I wanted to put on there just because I think that is really important. And I don't know that we would ever get to a place where we had $1.5 million laying around to do that. But certainly, as we look at grant funding opportunities moving forward in the future, that should be on the list. The recovering the roof of the water storage tank, that's something I'm waiting on a quote for as well. And I think we could do that work probably in-house. And if it's a small figure for that fluid film or epoxy, certainly that should be done sooner than later. I guess the birds, the cover that's on it now, the birds have gotten into it, started to deteriorate. And now they're picking it. Yeah. So we need to recover. So I'm really hoping that depending on that cost, we can get that one at least into the FY26 budget, because I don't think it's going to be a lot. Really, that would be my hope, is to get some of the cybersecurity improvements in there, get some of the harbor improvements already in there, get the covering of the water storage. Then we were talking about doing a few water meters. I'm waiting on that one. So those projects would go in. Water treatment plant parts is in there right now, that 8,900, unless you guys wanted to change that. And then we started talking about new media every couple of years and pump replacement. Last time I had a quote for that, it was over 7,000, just over 7,000. And that was a while ago. So I need to look back into that and get a schedule. I wish I had a little bit more of these answers, but I thought it was important that we start having this discussion so you guys can start looking at what you guys want us to focus our time on with putting into the budget for this year. Of course, we talked about the heavy equipment storage complex. That doesn't seem as big of a priority compared to some of these other things that we need to take care of. Lake Susan, RV Park, dock. We do have a figure from the state, but I don't know how or what that includes, that 12.8 million. So that's a request I put in to AMHS to see if they can break down that cost for me a little bit more. And then we can get the report where that comes from. We've talked about doing some BHO yard improvements, putting electricity in. And I will say that BHO is a healthier account, and that's one that has more reserves in it, if that's something you guys want to do. Block Street, of course, remains a priority, but I don't think we're going to make movement in FY26 unless you guys want to push something into that, into a pot of money for that. Sidewalks we continue to work on. We're going to do the pedestrian counters this summer at cost for DOT. Police department is another one that it would be great if we could throw a little bit of funding in. You know, I don't know if we're looking at 5,000 or less to do a little bit of remodel in that office building. I am going to be meeting with the director for the VPSOs from API. Hopefully when I get back from my trip to go over a few things. So we can talk about that as well. Cause I know that they've put in some money to do some fixing up in that space before. And then of course we've talked about maybe backhoe or a skid steer in the future. So that's a lot of information. And I know this is a lot of information, but this is just kind of to get your guys' juices flying. Thinking potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these smaller ones could probably go into the budget and fit in. And we'll talk about where that funding source comes from. But at the meantime, are there before we get into that funding source discussion, are there other capital projects that you guys would like to see added to this list? Are there any comments that you have on these projects in particular at this moment? And then we can kind of talk about how that funding comes about.
I have one quick question, Heidi. On the water treatment plant, the pump replacement, is that just for the pump point? That's for the two. So we have 2 big pumps up there with electric motors on them. Is that just the pump itself off of that, or is that like a new electric motor replacement? What is that? Or maybe you don't know off the top of your head, but I'm just wondering where that 7,000 came from.
So I don't know. This is something from prior to my time with administration that's always kind of been in the background that we need to do this. And then I know when Jordan Cameron was still here, we talked about it. And, I asked him where we were at, if this was something we still needed to plan for. And at that time, we didn't, but we haven't followed up since. So it's just something that's been in the background and I need to look more into it.
I would look at that before we even talk about that one. I would try to get a little bit more. Those are big electric motors. They've got soft starts on them. They probably got a pretty long life, but I mean, I know they run a lot. So, and I could see the pump section of that needing rebuilt probably long before the electric motors, but we've got 2 of them and I can't remember if those are set up lead lag or how that's set up, but those should be part of, on the maintenance replacement cycle or rebuild cycle. One of those should get addressed every so often, but we might want to talk to engineering on that too.
Absolutely.
On some of that stuff at CRW.
Yep. Fantastic feedback. Thank you. And that's why I'll keep bringing it forward and we'll have those discussions. That way it doesn't get lost in the background.
Perfect. Anyone else? Questions, comments on anything so far? I have one more. Have we done anything yet? We started talking about even putting a few pedestals. I know we did something there. The pedestals in the boatyard. What have we done to date electrically? Have we done anything yet on that?
Excellent question. So we did replace a few breakers last year, at least one breaker. But no, there's been very minimal, which is why that's part of that 24,000 is to start replacing some of those pedestals.
Okay. Well, you're talking pedestals on the I'm talking I think we were talking about
VHM.
Yeah, remember we were talking about adding some new smaller pedestals in the yard.
That's right. Okay, so I still need that quote. Pedestals, yard, and harbor, and see what that looks like.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. I can do that. Anything else you guys want me to tackle in the immediate future? Hey.
Sidewalks,
Paving and sidewalks.
guard railing.
Well, that's a bigger conversation that we have to get DOT on board with, and we're working on it.
I talked to him today.
DOT?
Yes.
Who'd you talk to with it?
Well, I talked to Tyler,
Oh, okay.
but I brought it to his attention that that's their road and they need to do
Yeah.
something about it.
Yeah.
Guardrailing towards the beach?
Yeah.
Well, didn't, we used to have guardrailing there, didn't we?
There's a little bit.
There's a little bit left.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a bigger conversation. So I've got some pretty good contacts going right now, and and I'm going to invite traffic and safety here this summer and get that engineer here. And we'll just do a nice walkthrough.
Yeah, what about that
Well-
huge hole?
I mean, you look at the road to the airport and the sidewalk goes to a dead end out there, you know, I mean, they should have paved all the way to the airport and continue to the sidewalk because people fly in, they walk to town. It's a destination that you have a lot of foot traffic as well as car traffic. But, you know, if they could pave that and continue the sidewalk that they started, it just dead ends at a dead end, you know, but those are some things I'd like to see in the future happen, I guess.
Because anybody know where the conversation is at with DOT for that huge washout? Where is that? Like, was that Whiskey Creek or it's like at towards Jackaloff?
Mhm.
What's that called? That's a specific.
I know what you're talking about. I haven't heard anything, but I will put that in with our list of we need to talk to DOT.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I know that someone somewhere is like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna fall off the road. But as far as the local awareness goes,
Mhm.
it's getting bad.
Mhm.
Was it Rum Runners Creek? Something like that. And also, where do we land on water meters?
So that's on this list here, and we are waiting for that quote back from, well, Jordan was going to do a little bit of work, and then I have a lead from somebody in Talkeetna that they did something very similar recently. So I just need to get a hold of them and see what they had recommended or what their recommendations were and some of their sources so that we can have a few different options and ideas and be able to figure out what the best would be.
I did not volunteer. No, I was volunteered. Duh.
So that we can make sure that's on the list too for FY26. Okay.
Doesn't give away their time to volunteer.
So that's quite a list. Is there other things you guys would like to see for FY26 just off of this list or to add to this list?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, Heidi, where you made a little information about the police office building. We talked about that before, new wallpaper and such. I thought we could just do that in-house and there's probably money available in the account.
Yep.
Yeah, so is that something that just can be taken and put on Public Works list of stuff or somebody to just take care of?
Absolutely. If that is the will of the body, we will implement that in the FY26 budget, which is what we're talking about now. So absolutely, we can put that in there for FY26 to get that done.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, I agree with Vivian on that one. And I think we talked about that one too. That's kind of was my thoughts. You know, we do keep a nice reserve in there every year and we use the rest of that. It'd be nice to direct you know, whatever that is, if it's 3,000 to 5,000 or whatever it's going to cost to just keep that, you know, we've got good tenants in there and let's just keep that building up. And it should be nice if someone's going to come in, you know, and have a discussion with the VPSOs. So
Okay. So far we're going to look at putting potentially some cybersecurity improvements in. Once I get the quote back, we'll put some stuff in for the police office, the covering of the water storage tank, water meters, some of those water parts, for the water treatment plant, and then looking for media and pump. We'll find out more about that for in the future. And that police office, if I didn't already say that. So that's a pretty good list of some small things that we can kind of knock off and take care of. And I'll work on the budget and I'll work on the reserve counts as we move through this budget process to make sure that we're able to cover those. And I'll come back with you and let you know where we stand. Is there anything else, you guys? And then I can talk about the reserve counts a little bit, and that might help also keeping those thinking caps on and moving forward about some of these smaller projects that we can manage.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, and the quote for the pedestals in the harbor. Okay. Yep. Okay. So just wanted to call out our funding sources as they're becoming a little bit more accessible as we're making gains through this budget process every year. So some of the main funding sources for capital projects that can be considered beyond grant programs include the Port Free for the Harbor, which we have designated projects for this year, unless there's some changes that council wants to see. And those recommendations come from the Harbor Master. There's the 2% sales tax, which is restricted for public works, the Seldovia Permanent Fund, which is restricted for land acquisition, the Harbor Improvements Capital Project Fund, and then there's a few additional reserve accounts that have been assigned funds from the City Council. That's that Replacement Vehicle Fund, the Trails Improvement Fund, which is the Susan Lake Fund, Fuel Retail Facility CIP, was started in FY25, where 10% of the monthly revenue from the tenant's lease is going into that account for future repairs. And then in FY25, the Police Public Safety Reserve Fund was also set up, and that 50,000 was implemented and put into that. So if you look down below, this is a rough draft of what those funds look like to date with that Seldovia Permanent Fund principal. And I believe I took that number directly from where we were at that date when I was looking at it. So it has gone down a little bit. It's going to go up and down with where it's at. The Major Maintenance and Repair Fund has gone up a little bit. And I wanted to point out that this budget document doesn't do a good job of capturing the unassigned portion of that Major Maintenance and Repair Fund, but I am going to add that in for the FY26 budget, because if you look on the next page, 6, you'll see the assigned fund balances as of June 30th, 2024, that's from our draft audit. And so these are going to be part of the next discussion, but I forgot where I was going to. Nope, sorry. I went too fast on that. I didn't put it in here. Don't look at that one yet. We're still on. I didn't put that second snippet in that shows that there is, and I put it in the note down here, there's actually $49,853 in the unassigned MMRF funds, and that's interest that's been accumulated, but we don't have those allocated out to the specific funds, water, sewer, dock, harbor, BHO. So it's just been interest on the account as a whole. So that's $49,000 that could be utilized for projects. And then the $66,000 that I also noted down here is kind of a mystery right now. I think I'm getting more comfortable with where it's at. I believe it was part of the original deferred maintenance that the city received for Jackaloff Bay Dock, and then it just kind of sat in the audit. It just sat in our accounts, but it wasn't accounted for budget wise or brought forward until the last couple of years. When I started taking over this audit process, and I was able to note it, and it's called the Harbor CIP Fund. It's up to $66,647, and we first note it and can track it in the FY17 audit, or that's as far back as we've gotten. And it started as like a 50,000 in there. And if you add that up with the difference of what was moved into the Jackaloff deferred maintenance account, it adds up to what we would have had at that time for the total of that deferred maintenance account. So we're having a meeting that was probably way convoluted. We're having a meeting on Friday to discuss that further, but potentially there's some funds there around 60,000 that probably belong in the harbor or the general fund, and we'll narrow that down. And then upon that, we'll be able to track that and put that in the budget so that we see it a little bit better. So there's a few little pots here and there. And then if you go to page 6, I wanted to talk about also that we do have these ending fund balances, and that have come up from time to time. And with how uncertain things have been previously, I think they've kind of just sat, but they are there and they are accessible if there are smaller projects or things that council wants to do with them, or if you guys want to start seeing them move into the major maintenance repair fund or a CIP. It's recommended by the GFOA that at least a 2-month revenue target be available in each fund, and you have exceeded that for all of them. So that picture here from the FY24 draft audit shows those ending fund balances, as well as under that harbor improvements, that 66,000 that sits there that we're remedying, and capital outlay, that's the greater payment. So you can dismiss that one because that's what we owe on that. But so Boat Harbor, that's the ending fund balance, 55, water is 245, that 66. Then we have fire and EMS, which that's not ours. That's the department's. And then senior meals, there's a little bit that we could utilize to help offset FY26, since we're not sure where the state's going to be with that. Wastewater is 127, BHO facility is that 56, and that should be a little bit higher, so I'll double check on that one. And then dock is 32. So if you look at the net effect, I wanted to just show this, what from FY24 the audited net effect of each account was. And then looking back at the last 5 years, whether they are holding steady, like water is about that every year. It goes up and down between 10,000. Sewer has been positive for 2 years, but the 3 years prior to that, it was negative. So I wouldn't say that that's super steady yet, but we're headed in the right direction. And I feel like we'll continue to head in the right direction. Harbor remains steady within about 10,000 for that net every year. BHO is really unsteady. It goes from positive to negative net, higher positive. It was negative last year. And that was a lot of it was write-offs, or I should say for FY24, but a lot of that was write-offs. The few years before that, it was positive, but it wasn't very high. We are seeing, sorry. So it did have, it was negative the year before, sorry. For FY24, it had a positive of 18,000. The year before that was negative because of the write-offs. That was about 22,000 from all that boat work that we did and removed. So we're getting better at that one, keeping track of it, and we're hoping that will continue, that will even out, and that we'll have a more steady income from that moving forward. And then dock was 1 year positive, and that one we're fighting for every year. So certainly don't know that we want to mess with some of those more unsteady ones very much, because it is sometimes we are drawing down that balance, but or drawing down on that ending fund balance, but showing that reserve target for each, they're met for each, and then that difference. So that is there's potential there for projects, for pumps, for media replacement, as long as we keep trending forward, that we can utilize some of those funds for that. I also wanted to note that the city of Seldovia will be receiving $30,000 from the state for their water service line inventory. That was a reimbursement grant that for completing that project that the state will reimburse back to us. And so Jan had asked, she said, well, where do you want to put this? And we'll, of course, we will put up a resolution accepting that award. But I would ask council, do you want that to go back directly into the water, or do you want to see that go into the MMRF for future projects? We can help utilize that for some of those bigger things like the media replacement. So that's something to consider as well. It's that 30,000.
Are you looking for an answer from us?
Sure.
So we have water, we talked about sealing up some of the leaks in the water lines and that, could that funding there go towards that?
That 30,000?
Yes.
Sure.
I'd probably recommend directing that money towards fixing some of the water leaks and things that we have here.
Yeah, that's not as big of a concern right now for water. It's more of a concern for sewer. We are holding between 30 and 35,000 gallons of use
Well,
a day, which is
whatever the
pretty
utility
low.
Project is one way or the other, water or sewer, where it makes most sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is directly related back to water, but that doesn't mean you can't appropriate it to sewer if you'd rather. And those two kind of go hand in hand. So if that's something the council wanted to consider, it's certainly doable.
Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Hey, I'd like to touch base on something you said a little bit earlier. Before I start into that, the bigger one to me is the media filters.
Mhm.
And, I don't think we heard what the recommended replacement time was on that. But like with so many other things, I'd like us to be able to determine what the recommended replacement is, were we at with that particular filter or filters, there's
Mhm.
3 of them, and have some type of planned cycle to replace those
Mhm.
so that when there are funds in the water account, we can save to plan to replace those. And the other thing that Jeremiah said tonight that I hadn't even thought about is there is a big difference between the pump itself and the motor. We need to determine when, same thing, when that needs to be replaced, or if both items are just one or the other. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then for the smaller projects, those pedestals, both in the harbor and in the boatyard, I'd love to see a plan based on how much they cost to have some type of plan. We're going to replace 2 in each yard a year, or we're going to replace 6 in each yard a year, depending on what kind of funds, so that everybody could decide what we really want to do.
Mhm.
And we can't run an effective boatyard
Mhm.
and charge people for electricity with pedestals that are catching a fire.
Mhm.
So I just would, a little bit of planning on some of these hits I think it'd really help us a lot. I don't know how much Jeremiah has to put with that, but you could be talking about a lot of money back to those pumps. You could be talking about a pretty big hit when it comes, if you have to replace motors too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, and I think to John's point, Heidi, I think we just need to start taking a little more proactive approach on the inventory of items, periodic maintenance items, that we know either are going to fail or can fail. I mean, anything mechanical is basically going to run out of service life at some point. So
Exactly.
it needs to, that's, I mean, in their spare time, if we start having, Johnny would be a good one to start having him work on a list, right? If you got you guys a list, and then we can start looking at that inventory, what that's like, get an idea of, current service life, what's left, and then you've got the whole picture. You as a manager would probably really appreciate that, and it would help you going forward in the future. simply having the inventory at your fingertips, bringing those items, to council, and then council said just simply goes off the schedule and says, yeah, I want to, like John said, 2 more of those, 3 more of those. The problem is how we got here is you think back, every small town is the same. You wait for that golden pot of money to come, right? It's called deferred maintenance. So all we keep doing is deferring and deferring and deferring, kicking the can down the road, hoping for this big golden goose. And by then everything's broken. I mean, it's broken. So I am more of the mindset, you just pick away. If it's 1 or 2 a year, and that's all we can afford, then great. After 8 or 10 years that we've been talking about these items, pretty soon you've got all 50 of them are new because we've been pecking away at them. That's the way I look at it. And then anything else that we get in terms of grant funding or something like that, that's just gravy on top and maybe allow us to, get it done. So,
And another thing too, that you didn't mention there, but I agree 100%. But the one thing is nowadays, $10,000 won't buy you nothing, right, Jeremiah?
correct.
So I kind of look at like the $5,000 for the cop shop. We ought to be able to come up with that. I mean, I think the city has done a tremendous job the last 5 years at turning things around. Now we need to figure out how to start making progress, but yet have enough reserves setting aside that one of those $40,000 items go down, we can deal with it. But those big ticket items, what I'm talking big ticket items, are 15 grand or more, or maybe 10 grand, whatever the council feels comfortable with. Those items, we got to have a plan for that stuff. And if we decide to use a portion of the funds that we set aside to replace this piece of equipment and that one, we put them together one year, then we're back to save it again. You know what I mean? For the replacement. Anyway, I'm done.
Yeah, it's like,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the question I had was, Heidi asked us do we have a preference where that $30,000 gets back to what account? Was that that's a reimbursement to the city of Seldovia, is that correct, Heidi?
yes, it's for water. So it's whether we're putting that back in the ending fund balance or we're putting it in the reserve. It seems like it makes sense to be in the reserve and then making that plan for the asset management and replacing it. We did start an asset management inventory. And it has all of the facilities, the streets, the stormwater drains, the vehicles, and their life cycle in it. But we are still drilling down on the smaller things like the harbor components, the water treatment plant components. Those are things that we're working through currently, but we don't have that. And as I've learned, or as I'm learning from other people who are pretty active in asset management, is that it never ends.
I guess that was my concern.
I think
Your microphone, John.
Sorry, guys. That was my issue, is the money's coming from water. And I still don't know as a council member, I don't know where we're at with the filters. So it makes it hard for me to make a decision.
I'll get that to you.
Sorry.
No, this is what we need. This is why we're having this discussion, so that you guys can provide direction and I will follow through.
Unfortunately, in the small town we live in with the multiple hats that you wear, Heidi, you are also the Public Works de facto director. So
Feel bad because I do say a lot, and I'm sure you guys have heard me. It's on the list, and it's very genuine. It's very genuine. It's especially lately with all these amazing projects and things happening. I do notice that some things are falling a little bit more and more behind. I do get to them, but not to excuse it. It's just there's a lot. So they have to happen when they can happen. And that's a great part about this discussion, is it brings it back to the forefront. And I know that I need to get you guys these answers before we pass the budget. So it's on the list.
I think for now, going back to Vivian's comment and then what Jack was saying, yeah, I think it would make sense to have that $30,000 reimbursement, probably just put that in the MMRF and in the reserve, so that we've got, so we know it's there, and then we can access it and or use it, start planning to use it for something.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So then if we go to page 7, you'll see you've already answered some of these questions. I asked if there are more projects you'd like to see included, and I believe we've got some great response backs for that. I didn't ask, but I wanted to pull out on here if you guys, that's something that is possible, if you would like to see or consider paying the road grader off in FY26. Again, with not a full answer to you guys back, we have inquired to the NC Machinery if there would be any reduction in interest if we made that early payment. And after, if you turn to page 9, you'll see this is what the document will look like starting on page 8 in the budget. That kind of shows the movement of these funds from what is in the fund at the beginning balance, what's assigned or restricted, what any requests are. So some of those projects like the police building won't go on here, the police improvements, because it's not coming out of these funds. But for instance, if what the resurfacing of the water tank needed to, it would go on here, or some of those other things that we're utilizing reserves for. And as noted, that's the MMRF, the Public Works Fund, the Harbor Improvements Fund, Permanent Fund, and then these additional reserve funds. So that's on page 8 again, that's in the budget. And page 9, showing the beginning balances, any transfers, that $5,989 at the top of the page under Jackloff is interest. So that went back in, so that was interest from FY24, went back in into the Jackloff deferred maintenance account is what I asked the auditors to do, because we need 140,000. That's our committed match for that project. So we have that available there, and letting it sit with the additional amount to see what we end up needing in the end for that project. And then that harbor improvements is again showing there. And I don't know if it'll stay there or not. That'll depend on the meeting we have with the audit team. Public Works, that's where you'll see that 2%. And we did a transfer of $39,824.82 in FY25. And we'll have a beginning balance of $127,239 in that account. We have an amount remaining for that greater lease, and this includes the interest of $205,000. If you look at putting in another $30,000 which is about what we've been above the greater payment for FY26. Well, it ends up being part of FY25 and FY26 because we do the transfer in FY26, but it's for this summer. If we stay where we're at this summer and we are netting that 81,000, 85,000-ish, potentially you're looking at making the $51,000 payment, adding another 30,000 or more into this assigned funds, so that 51 comes off this 205, and then the 130 it evens out, and you should be able to cover it if that's something that you guys want to consider. And I realize that's a loaded question without knowing if there's a benefit with interest, but if there is, I'd like to have your feedback. If not, if you want to let it sit here and the equipment remains under warranty and then we just make payments annually, that's great feedback to hear as well. Finishing up with just looking at this budget form, you'll see that we have the list of projects under that are assigned funds, and they've already been assigned through resolution. The majority of them are through grants, and that's, you have that road grader lease, the resurfacing, multi-purpose building generation project that we're still working on. Stormwater that we received the grant agreements today, finally. Those two are in there. And then your unfunded projects. So there's room for requested projects. If departments are requesting projects, we'll put that in that section. And then unfunded projects are the ones from the CIP. So sitting there, are all these large ticket items that are listed in the 2025-2030 capital improvement plan, but don't have funding sources at this point. And then you'll see similar for the major maintenance repair fund, the transfer out of what was used in FY25, which was quite a bit. We have been utilizing these funds. As you can see, the beginning balance, the available balance I highlighted just because that's where the discussion is. If we start doing some of these smaller items, they can potentially impact this fund. And then looking down at, I just wanted to leave them on there so you could see where some of that funding came from, is the dock slab, the periodic inspection that's going to happen in the next couple months, new sensors that were bought, that boat harbor trailer that was approved last night, and then the requested projects of the water treatment plant and the comprehensive plan, which I just put in there as a placeholder as we look at funding from KPB. I thought I had noted that, but I think I did in the other document. And then again, those capital improvement projects that are unfunded. So it's a little bit like the first document we talked about, but I was hoping that the first document was easier to see and would help shape what this looks like in the budget when you guys are going through. So then you have the replacement vehicle fund on the next page with the 6,531. No movement there, no assigned funds or requested projects at this time. We do have the 3 unfunded projects in the CIP, and then that trails improvement fund as well for Susan Lake. So that just kind of gives a rundown of what it looks like in the budget. And we'll see a final draft as we move through these items in this next month or less than a month. And then if you go back to page 7 with me, we discussed the 30,000. And so then I would just ask if there are any additional consideration for those reserve accounts, or if there are any additional transfers or appropriations that you want to see from those special revenue fund ending fund balances. And I'll make recommendations now that I have a direction from council when we get towards the final budget document. So if you don't have any, that's fine at this time. But if there's anything that's sparked your interest any further after this discussion, please let me know, and then we'll make those adjustments.
Mayor Campbell,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I got a couple questions. It's just pure ignorance on my part because I don't know. The water tank and the leak. Is that something that the birds could get into our water?
No, it's just a cover over the top of it.
So it doesn't have a steel roof to it?
You know, I would have to double check on that.
Jeremiah, do you know?
I'm pretty sure it does have a steel roof, but I don't know if it's got a coating on it. I can't remember. It's been years since I've been up there.
Well, I guess that you see what I'm getting at. Is it something that's going to blow up on us in a few years? And
No, it has a steel roof because we were talking about,
so it doesn't freeze.
yeah, and we were talking about epoxying it as a potential option. It's to protect it,
Okay.
the roof.
I'm just going by what I know of the water tower I was on the roof of, one in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Just curious. Thank you.
Heidi, you mentioned paying off the 205,000.
Mm-hmm.
Have you calculated what the savings would be on interest if you was to do that?
We're waiting to hear back that response from NC Machinery on what we or NIT from NC Machinery from what we would save. Before, they kind of gave us an answer that really wouldn't save anything, but we went back again this week and said, hey, this is something that could happen in the near future. What would that look like? So we're waiting to get that response back. And when I have that, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Anyone else got any additional thoughts, questions, comments? A lot of numbers here. I think we're sitting fairly decent looking at everything here, so that's a plus. It's nice when you do have positive balances and stuff, so that's good.
I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, thank you guys so much for bearing with me through this work session. I know it's a little, I know when we had this discussion last year, it was a little heavy and like, whoa. So it seems like we're making progress and we'll keep working with it. And I really appreciate all of the feedback that I received because that really helps us, it helps me know which direction I need to go. So that was really helpful. I really thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Do we have, Liz, do we have anyone from the public that wanted to comment at all on this topic tonight?
No, we do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, so everybody, we're starting to get down to it. Heidi, let's see, what do we got next for work sessions? And then when are we going to start looking at actual draft budget before final?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're looking at a work session in the week of two in the week of April 21st or April 28th. One will be to go over these last minute loose ends. So senior meals, this capital budget, if there's anything else that creeps up that needs to go in there, and then one for the final budget. So hoping to have that final budget presented to you guys by April 30th. That might be a great day for that work session. And then we will be able to introduce that budget on May 12th. Unless there's something else you guys would like to see before that, please let me know if there is. But that's kind of where we're at. We've gone over a draft budget. We've gone over the fee schedule. Now you've kind of gone over capital projects. So that gives us really great direction. I feel like we can probably wrap it up in another meeting or two. And once I have these answers to bring back to you guys, and then present that final draft. Does that work for you guys?
I think so. It works for me.
I'm sorry, I got one more, Jeremiah.
Yep, go ahead.
So those different funds that you're talking about and the ending fund balances, do they have a recommended amount that we should be at the end of every year? Should we be maintaining annually 20% of that fund or 30% of that fund, to keep us, with our credit score and all the other factors that play in, and possibly something like the lift station going down so that we have what's the recommended number for that?
Excellent question. So the GFOA, which is the Governmental Finance Officer Association, recommends a 2-month revenue target. So you'll see in the page 6 of this document, the reserve target, that's the second to last column. And that's going to shift annually.
Which page is that now?
Page 6 of the packet.
Okay.
That's going to shift annually based on what the revenues are, but it's somewhat consistent. There's not too big of shifts from what we're bringing in. But if we take I took a 2-month from the FY24, since that's the audited numbers, and so I did a 2-month revenue from each of the funds and put that in as the reserve target.
Okay.
And you can see we're meeting that at each, and then the difference is what is above it.
Okay.
So those funds, they're all available if you want to utilize them, but you certainly having the reserve, like you said, in case there's an emergency, is important, and that's why that recommendation is there. And then there are of course, municipalities that go beyond that. So if there's something, thinking about the fact that we're a remote rural community,
Well,
what the cost of things getting here, if there's an additional, like if you want to double that 4 month, I've definitely seen communities do that. That would be a great discussion to have and have that feedback from you guys of,
I guess that's where I was getting at. Is
Yeah.
I don't know what the recommended percentage is, and then that's why I was asking the question about the water tank.
yeah,
Is, initially I was, interested in seeing the grader paid off,
hmm
but I think we're gonna find that there's no benefit for us to pay it off. They're not gonna give us any kind of break. And I'm just wondering if maybe things like that tank repair shouldn't be done and just continue to make our payments and meet our obligations, but maybe look at getting some of this other stuff out of our way. I think you'd mentioned that maybe the city staff might be able to fix that. I don't know.
yeah. Between the city staff and actually that's something that Jordan's volunteered to as well, potentially. So I'll bring him
Yeah.
back in that he could come in with his RWA service
Well,
and help.
I'm certainly not thinking that, I think that's something we need to have in our next conversation as a group. And,
Mhm.
but I don't know, there's so much that's got to be fixed.
There is, and thank you for bringing that up because actually the water tank project, water has its own fund, its
Right.
own fund balance and MMRF. But when you're talking about that 2% fund, if that's something that we keep making payments and then you do want to start utilizing, that's when you can start talking about buildings,
Exactly.
roads, equipment. I mean, we just talked about the fuel and lube roof, and we are saying that we're not saying we do have 127,000 there. We're potentially anticipating another 30,000. That might not be enough to cover it, but being able to do some of the smaller repairs and things from that is something that council could very much consider.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else with final thoughts tonight before we wrap it up?
I'm going back to the water tank for a minute. This tank, I haven't looked at it, but apparently it's standing outside. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes they spray foam the top of these. Is that what we're looking at? Is it a foam is this something? Yeah, okay. So a lot of times they'll use a urethane foam on top of them. And that's probably what you see deteriorating on there.
You just gave me a light bulb moment. If we're having somebody come over and spray foam the inside of the maintenance shop, perhaps they could just pop up there and do that. Is that the same foam?
Yeah, it's not. I think when they do that urethane foam, then they'll put like a poly shield or something over the top of that to protect the foam. And when that breaks, like if it gets it's just like a shell, right? A light shell. And it's almost like an epoxy shell basically. And when that keeps the water from getting into the foam and the birds from getting it. And, and then, and once that breaks though, and that shell gets compromised, that's what happens. And it starts just blistering and falling apart. And if you don't fix that, then the birds will start picking the foam.
Well, we'll put it on the list for this year.
Maybe putting an aluminum shield on top of the existing might solve the problem. How big a tank is it?
It's big. It's 600,000
10,000 gallons.
No, it's like 600,000, 500,000, somewhere in there between 5 and 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 600, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a cylinder. It's not like one of those like the Palmer one. It's not.
It's
like
a
tank
silo.
farm. Yeah, there you go. It's a silo, like tank farm, not like a.
Maybe we'll do a field trip tomorrow.
That'd be good.
Jeremiah, if that insulation was left to go, could it compromise the steel roof on that eventually down the road?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. That water will get through the foam and then it'll just sit there and it'll rust. So
My point, exactly. That's what I was getting at.
The other thing, on spray foam insulation, like on fuel and lube. I've talked to them about on the hanger insulation, and they got to have like 70 degrees, typically a clean surface to work off of. And I opt not to go that route because it was so expensive compared to glass insulation.
Yeah, it's all cost money. All right, well, good conversation, you guys. Appreciate everything. Heidi, hopefully you got something out of this tonight, and then you can keep working the numbers, the priorities, crunching it down, and then yeah, I know you're getting close here.
I did. I got a lot out of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you guys got what you needed out of it, because I know there's a lot of questions, but that direction you guys provided was really beneficial. So I will have some answers for you at the next meeting.
And if anyone else does have anything that comes to mind, send Heidi or Liz an email on it and get it in front of them here pretty quick. And then, yeah, if it's something that we gotta talk about again at the next meeting, we can certainly do that. So you definitely got all the information in your packets, so it's all there. All right, well, if nothing else, then we're gonna go ahead and adjourn the work session tonight and call it a night. Thanks everyone for participating, and we'll talk to you at the next meeting.
Okay, thanks. Good night.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you guys.